Yes, Major Season is still in full swing, and this will be our final Double Swing episode, previewing the major playoffs. It's going to be an interesting one, because there's not that many teams to pick from. We're only picking two favourites, as it were, but then we are going to discuss our full Pickem brackets, who we think is going to win each matchup, and who the dangerous teams are that are still lurking beyond our selections. So far, it's been a bit of a uninteresting run in terms of our picks, because we keep splitting it. We keep both getting two correct, two wrong. The fans still pulling away, the occasional upset run. But for now, we need to find a little edge to separate ourselves from one another. And hopefully I can do that here, because I've got some picks that I'm liking. I think you may have taken some risks where I didn't. I think you've had the same approach as me. You did think in your head, I've got to start getting some wins. And yeah, let's get straight into it though, because you have first pick. Who have you taken to open up the major playoffs? Surprise me.
Well, I was annoyed when it came to the elimination stage that you snapped this team up, so I just decided to spitefully go straight with them again. And it's Spirit. I mean, they are the top team right now. Like, whether or not you want to sort of reflect that in HLTV rating or not, they're number 2 in HLTV, but I would put them very comfortably over FaZe, who currently hold the number 1 spot. Like, this Spirit team have just they have a certain moxie to them that is just so alluring. They've got aggressive players, they have players that can end rounds, they have good supportive elements, and the calling, I actually think, I've been critical a little bit of Chopper's calling, because sometimes it does feel very sporadic and a little bit chaotic, but I think the way that they play off of each other in these calls just feels so comfortable for everybody. So Spirit is my comfort lock-in for a finals, if not the whole event.
Yeah, it was the obvious pick, and it's been the obvious pick for a couple of events now, a couple of these shows, and you have voiced your frustration every time you get the opportunity to pick them. I'm going first, or every time you do pick them, the one time you did pick them, they had visa issues leading to them getting nerfed, so it's been rough for you. Here you go, you've got them in their full glory, everyone's there, they should be favourites to go win the entire event. I've been impressed, of course, as per usual with this team. It's not just been Donk either. There's been a good amount of sheer at this event that people have actually noticed and picked up on. So we can start to talk about the other players, and that's really cool. My concern is, of course, their first matchup. If I've got to play devil's advocate, their first matchup is as hard as it can be. It's the major playoffs, it's on stage, and it's against FaZe. So that could be a potential slip-up. Now, they've already beaten FaZe on stage this year in a massive best-of-5 final, but do we see that same Donk? Do we see the same Donk who absolutely ripped them to pieces? I'm not sure we do. We haven't seen them beat FaZe as a team in that scenario. So if I have to find little ways to pull this apart, tear you down, I'd have to say that. It's not much, but it's something, because I've got to find a way to make this seem like less of a perfect pick that we all know it is.
Yeah, it's not, the thing is, it's not like they haven't played FaZe before. They've played them in front of a stage, or in front of a crowd, and they beat them twice at the same event without dropping a map. I know you're trying. You are pulling at a thread
I have
here.
to.
But
yeah.
Even if there was going to be a chance, this FaZe don't feel like they're full force FaZe. Unfortunately, at the moment, they're playing a little bit. I don't know, just. It doesn't look as well organized, or it doesn't feel like the pieces are sort of adhering to each other for good trades, or taking responsive map control if you lose an area. I feel like it's slow at the moment from FaZe on the uptake on a lot of those rounds.
Yeah, I think it's it feels like a bit of mental sharpness in terms of the Rops and Rain. Those two guys just don't seem to be doing the little things, little proactive moves, and also hitting their shots in a lot of cases, especially for Rain, that you're used to and you expect when they are going on deep runs. So that's something to look out for. If that magically comes back in playoffs that we haven't seen so far, amazing. Inspired by the crowd, whatever you want to call it. But if it doesn't, they're going to get absolutely pub stomped. So not much to be afraid of there. If you're a Spirit fan, you guys have got a theoretically difficult matchup that couldn't be coming at a better time for you. So that's a really important pick, and I think that's one that's probably going to net you a couple points, because even if they don't win the entire event, I expect them to go deep. My favourite, already it's riskier, but I have to say, based on current form, I'm pretty happy to take them. I've got MOUZ Sports. Now, MOUZ Sports had a bit of an easy run. I saw that commented, and I didn't think about it until I looked through their matches. I was like, yeah, you didn't actually have to play that difficult of a set of games. But that being said, I believe in the players they have, and I believe in the way they've been playing. They've been really sharp. Every single piece has made sense. They're really the chemistry's really there. They're gelling off each other, vibing. It all makes sense for this to be the team of the moment. Like, really, right now is the time to pick them. They're gonna make another run here. Winning the event, that's going to be the real question. I actually think my second pick has a better chance of winning it overall than they do, but I think both have a great chance of making it really deep. So this MOUZ Sports team is going to come down a lot to not even YouM3, not Xertion. I think it's going to be, can Torji step up in the playoffs? Because when they have him firing, all of a sudden, yeah, they look like a legit championship level team. Having their AWPer who does require some spots, who takes a lot of gambles, who can cost them, he can make it a 4v5 quite often if his opening moves don't work out. I think MOUZ Sports, if he's sharp, if he shows up and if he's sharp, can make it to the grand final and potentially win. But without him, I think it'll be rough. So I'm taking a bit of a risk here, I think.
Yeah, I think MOUZ are interesting because I actually think they're probably the best team in this playoff bracket in the mid round. Like they've had I think the stat is like their 4v5% is almost like 50% win rate when
it's
they're
47.2. Yeah,
yeah,
I've got the numbers in front of me. I was prepared for that.
Which is mad. You know, like this team does feel like they do find good reactions or at least find good like solid trades. And I actually think, you know, while you might put a bit of emphasis on Torshi, like this is again a Shui test for me. Like who can make that decision in the mid round bar him, and can they actually work together? Because when you look at the rounds that they had against Eternal Fire or Ecstatic, you know, those were both quite close games in the elimination stage. For them, like there were a lot of opportunities for Ecstatic or Eternal Fire to take a lead, or you know, to push that game, or even take the win over MOUZ. But they found some great mid round adjustments that then exploited a weakness, or you know, just were able to space themselves into a post plan, and I just felt like it worked very well together. I do think it's the right time to pick MOUZ because they not only is this the sort of culmination of the project of bringing Shui back in for another major run, but it's also again these same youngsters that have been in a major playoffs before but haven't been able to sort of ruminate that into being one of the favorites for the event, weirdly, just based on, like you said, current form.
Yeah, they never quite feel like favorites, even when they are like, now they're playing like this. There's not too much hype for them as the major winners, and that's, I think a lot of it comes down to experience and the fact that we haven't actually seen them win a title together. So why would the major be the first one they go and pick up? So in that sense, it's a gambler's punch, I think, to try and take this roster. But yeah, this is the right moment to take them. I'm a huge YouM3 fan. I was a fan of him in the academy when I brought him in. Like I brought him on a prospects and just said literally the most polished 16-year-old you can imagine to find. Like he does every little thing correct beyond just shooting people in the head, which he's also, of course, amazing at. So yeah, huge fan of this team. Really liking it. Let's talk about your second favourite team, because here's where things get a little spicier. We're not talking about the 2-3-0 teams anymore. Who have you picked up?
Okay, first off, let's contextualize this. Like, this playoff bracket is pretty stacked. Like, for us to come into this event, I think there's many different options we could have picked. Yeah. And so many of them, I think what makes this playoff so exciting is that the traditional favorites, you know, when we're thinking about like a FaZe, a Na'Vi, a G2, a Vitality, like when you see those nameplates, you think, oh my god, actual sort of traditional favorites to see deep in a tournament. But what's exciting about the playoffs right now is that not all those teams have looked as comfortable as like their sort of favoritism status would maybe imply. So I've actually kind of weirdly angled for an underdog that feel like they're playing solid Counter-Strike at the moment.
You really have, yeah.
And it's like they're not missing out on some of the stars that they have been missing out on at some of the other events. You know, in terms of what we've seen so far from this stage, they've got everybody turning up. And I've gone with Cloud9. Listen, I get it. They don't have an AWPer in the traditional sense. Boomich isn't taking over games with that AWP. But his riflers are actually putting in very solid shifts, and they are trading they're trading really fast at the moment. I apologize for swearing, but it's actually been staggering.
It's okay. I do it a dozen times a video.
it's just kind of weird for me to see how well this team feels like it sort of it adheres to one another. Like they've got good cohesion at the moment, which is so odd when I think about like the previous struggles of this of Cloud9, albeit it's a completely different core and the system has changed dramatically, but they they feel like they make good moves. They play together a lot, even if the idea is weak. They are very committed to that philosophy, and it actually wins them quite a lot of rounds because of it. Like, and Axile is that missing star that I'm talking about. He actually had like a very solid elimination stage, and then you had some games where like Boomich was just completely out calling other teams on their T sides, which is one of the biggest issues Cloud9 have traditionally had, is actually sort of pulling together a comprehensive attacking side when it comes to these games. So yeah, I'm weirdly up on Cloud9, and I've also sort of gambled on one side of the bracket here as opposed to the other. So I don't know. I'm excited for Cloud9 and maybe what this playoffs brings for them.
Yeah, I was going to get into your picking strategy a bit later, because I did want to mention that. But yeah, let's talk about Cloud9 a little more here, because yeah, what a difference one player makes. Like, prior to this event, we'd seen this team with, like, Electronic having fragging moments, Perfecto playing some of his best Counter-Strike, really, like, in terms of being an involved, not so supportive, yet still crucial, like, critical piece to that side of the game. You had Hobbit, you know, not really finding his role entirely, but he had some decent moments, and Boomich was never terrible. The problem was Axile never delivered, like, anything close to his old form. And a lot of people said, yeah, you know, Rifler's peaks, they're short. What can you expect? Well, here we've had the comeback event. You see this happen. Players who are past it in terms of their rifling prime can have these events where they come back and they play at their best level. I mean, Forrest won IEM Oakland MVP in 2017, was it? 2018? He hadn't been that good a player for a long time, and he came back. This is how it feels like with Axile, except he can probably keep it going for a little while. He's still a very young player. In this event, though, I have to say, I was not expecting to see Cloud9 play that well, even just ignoring him as an individual coming back. I thought their level would still be limited by a bit of the awkwardness. Who's going to be, like, AWPing, changing every now and then. The calling still being a little rusty. But they have really locked in, outperformed my expectations. I still don't think they're going to go deep here. With all that said, I think top 8 for them is amazing considering their circumstances. But yeah, I don't think they're going to get very much further, because their opening matchup, it's against a certain team that I don't think they're going to beat. There's no way they're going to win this. And I'm going to let you... Have you got any more closing thoughts about Cloud9? Well, so I will very swiftly move on to the team they're going to lose to. Otherwise.
Well, no, I would just say, you know, I think Axile even had an interview where, you know, there's been talk before, or I guess between us or on like talk shows or watch parties that we've been on together, where we've talked about like Nafany and the philosophy, and you know, I've always held the opinion that it was Shiro and Axile and even Hobbit that were sort of working in tandem with Nafany. And unfortunately, Nafany is just a scapegoat. He's the lightning rod for the in-game leading philosophy. I think Axile even had an interview where it was like, you play a certain way your entire career. It's going to take time for you to adjust to like things changing, and you know, it doesn't feel like they want to sort of play this slow, work on my own terms type of gameplay, which is kind of what I've been alluding to before, is that they liked playing the Nafany system because it was comfortable for them. But this core that's come over from Na'Vi that have that experience under Blade don't play like that, and kind of refuse in a lot of sense to play that type of style. And it's forcing Axile to sort of get out of his comfort zone. So it's actually nice to see him integrate and find a way to perform in a different system, and actually, you know, kind of bring us back some of the rifling of old.
Yeah, that's a pretty good thing to bring up, because yeah, a lot of people will forget that there is a massive ideological shift between those two sorts of rosters, between those two groups. And I think that was part of the reason Boomich had to come in, was to just essentially bring the debate in the favour of Electronic and Perfecto. Like, in terms of the mentality of the team overall, Boomich was more in line with them. That's why he comes in. And hey, it's taken Axile a long time to adjust, but if he truly has just found his new fit, he's found the feel, the groove, and he can keep playing like this for the rest of the year, goodbye Hobbit, hello Orpa, please. And we're talking about a whole, like, more dangerous roster. Like, we're talking about a crazy dangerous roster. I still think they're limited. And that's because the team they're facing is going to be Vitality. And yes, Vitality have not looked brilliant at this event, but there's been one major reason for that. ZywOo's been sick. And now we know ZywOo's not like... Well, he's no MJ. He's not going to have a flu game. He's not that much of a psycho. He's far too, like, normcore, I think, to ever be that kind of guy. But he's going to be back in the playoffs. I bet you. He's been hammering the paracetamol. He's been taking his drugs. He's been trying to get recovered. He's sleeping 12 hours a night just to get over this stuff, I hope. And he's going to come into the playoffs back on full form. And against a team whose AWPer is Boomich, he's going to feast. He's going to absolutely feast. So I don't see any reason to pick against Vitality here. They're on the side of the bracket with Spirit, which is going to be the matchup of the event, I think, in the semi-finals. But first they've got to just sweep aside this Cloud9 side, which shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, they have made it through despite poor performances, Vitality. But I'm not too bothered about that, because ZywOo wasn't having a great event, but guess who stepped up? FlameZ and Spinks. The Riflers are there. The Riflers are in force, and I think it's going to carry them through. Even if he's not as great, but I know he's going to be back. I know he's going to smash him. So they'll have so many win conditions activated that it'll all be a part of the plan. It'll seem like it was a part of the idea in the first place. ZywOo nerfed. Force these guys to take a little more impetus. Wake them up. Then in playoffs, truly look like the beast you are. That's why I'm picking Vitality, and honestly, I do think, in terms of my odds to win the event, I think it's Spirit 1, Vitality 2. I'm seeing the repeat if they can make it past Spirit.
Okay. Yeah, I think the whole ZywOo being sick angle is also something that really shouldn't be an issue, considering the sort of the gap we have between the elimination stage and now the playoffs. You know, I think when you looked at some of those early days, if you actually looked at the camera, like the reaction cams of ZywOo, like that man looked like he hadn't slept. Like he looked wrecked.
Yeah.
Actually, like genuinely, you could tell that he wasn't feeling 100% just from that, and then it was only corroborated by Spinks. All right, to be honest, only really started looking at the camera after Spinks' interview, where it's like, yeah, he's been feeling a little under the weather, and you're like, oh yeah, I could see it. He's not the right. This man is not the right color. I do agree. I think ZywOo will come back. But I do think it will be a little bit of a, like, they've had to sort of shift their dynamic to sort of play around ZywOo being a little weaker. You know, he's the one jumping around corners and like baiting for his teammates. He's the one that's sort of trying to create space for his riflers, and actually, I guess, sort of contributed to the fact that Flames and Spinks maybe had a bit more impact or put up higher numbers for Vitality. That was an adaptation they made to bring something out of the fact that ZywOo wasn't feeling 100%. I think it's just a little bit worrisome because for me, you are reliant on ZywOo actually coming back and putting up like godly numbers. Like I get coming out from a sickness, you know, that first day, even when you're healthy, you're still maybe adjusting to how your body feels while playing the game. I know that it can feel sometimes like, oh, a whole weight is lifted off your shoulders. You know, this isn't an actual sort of physical performance sport where suddenly it's like, oh, I can breathe again, and I'm having to exert myself physically. A lot of the game is mental, and a lot of the game is just about like how you position yourself or what type of shots you're able to hit. And yes, sickness will impede you, but not to, I wouldn't say to like gross significant degrees. I guess the biggest problem is we don't know what kind of illness this is for ZywOo, or like what was actually weighing him down in that sense. So it's kind of hard to. It was hard for me. I looked at Vitality. I had a chance to pick them as well. It's hard for me to look at that and just think, I know for certain that he's going to be fighting at 100%, even if he doesn't feel like sick anymore. You know, he might still be on the mend, even though he's not like completely wrecked from not having any sleep anymore.
Okay. I mean, fair enough to have those sorts of doubts, but I do think, yeah, as you said, there is a sizable turnaround, and he was already ill during this set of games. So it's likely that he starts the recovery process like 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw towards the end, like, of him coming back was Sunday, and then Monday he's basically got Tuesday and Wednesday to like fully be practicing and feeling himself again. So I'm not too worried about that. I genuinely think we're going to see him back in full force. And the part that a lot of people don't consider is like, oh, but now the Riflers have to then give space back to him. Well, you're going to now. He's given it up to you. He's given you the opportunity. It's good. It's all about the morale. I think in terms of the energy in the team, when you've had a guy sick and you've managed to pull through the struggles, and then you get him back in full force, yeah, I think it's going to be great. They're going to have morale at an all-time high. They really had to fight to get to this part, and that should galvanize them. And I'm seeing a deep run. Now, as I said, the Spirit game decides everything, but I'm feeling pretty confident they get there.
I have to say, you know, when we think about this playoff bracket, that side of the bracket does feel like the most legit side of the bracket.
Oh, it feels crazy. Yeah.
like if FaZe make it to the finals and win it, if Vitality make it to the finals and win, if Cloud9, Spirit, like if any of those guys make it to the finals, like you'll look back at those games and think, wow, they beat like some really strong teams, and this is a total. I mean, it's just a totally legit playoff bracket. Even on the other side, but it does feel that way, but it feels a little bit more like there's an underdog or two in terms of like who has actually performed or gone to that side of the bracket, and
a little bit, yeah.
It will still be of like a valid run, but it will feel as though like you maybe dodged a bullet by being on, you know, a Navi that have looked a little shaky, a G2 that have looked a little shaky. There are some maybe not caveats, but there'll be an asterisk or two saying you didn't have to play Spirit, you didn't have to play FaZe in the opening round.
Yeah, because if you theorize like a Vitality run would have to look like potentially beating Cloud9, cool, dangerous team, not the craziest. Beating Spirit or FaZe, most likely Spirit, the team of the year so far, and then go on and probably beat MOUZ, about as informed as it gets, about as talented as it gets. Yeah, that'd be an insane run. And then Spirit, on the other hand, same thing. You beat FaZe, and then you have to go through Vitality, or Cloud9, most likely Vitality, in my eyes. And then you have to also beat that MOUZ team. It's a really legit side of the bracket. Honestly, it could go down as like an all-time major run in terms of the level of team beaten, if, say, a Spirit does make it through. So that's going to be interesting. So what I thought we'd do now, because this was really quick. We're like 20 minutes in. These videos usually last basically an hour. I thought we'd talk about our exact pickems that we've actually gone with. It's not going to affect the points or anything. It's just going to be an interesting conversation to have. Because I've seen it go a certain way, and I've pretty much revealed all my picks just by who I've taken and why I've explained my matchups. But I'm curious to see how your bracket compares. So let's start with the opening matchups. You obviously have Cloud9 beating Vitality, don't you?
Yes. So I've got Cloud9 beating Vitality, Spirit over FaZe, Eternal Fire over Na'Vi, and MOUZ over G2.
Well, that's as boring as it gets because I have the exact same opening pick except for Vitality beating Cloud9. I have Vitality beating Cloud9. I also pick Spirit to beat FaZe. I also think Eternal Fire upset Na'Vi because Na'Vi, with a really like flaccid Imma, an overperformance from JL, and sure, Wonderful's always decent, but he's never extravagantly good. And you can say the same thing about Bit, just as a rifler. He's been solid, but never amazing. I just don't think they have the tools, really, to right now beat like an Eternal Fire who come in like fired up, you know, ready to brawl and excited to be on the stage for the first time in so long, representing their country. Like, I think Eternal Fire will be hyped up and they will just steamroll them if, you know, we don't get Imma life games. Yeah,
I mean, I think the caveat will be Major had a very, very good elimination stage as well, right?
Surprisingly, yeah.
This is an in-game leader that was out-dueling basically everyone ahead of him. And I think afterwards, like in his post-game interview, was like, yeah, I woke up at like 7 a.m. and I watched like six demos from Virtus Pro or something before they played them. And I mean, the man looked like he had some very good reads on what was happening in the rounds and just kind of understood what his fights were going to be before he had them and won the fights. So, I mean, this looks like a very heavily motivated Major for the Major playoffs, which is honestly, if you can get that kind of positive reinforcement of I put in a bunch of this work and it paid off when I actually got into the game, like that's a little worrisome, I think, for any of the teams that had to face them in this playoff bracket, because you'd maybe even have to think about changing a couple of the things that you were going to do if there was somebody that was willing to put in that much sort of on-hand work himself.
Yeah, that's going to be lethal, because if you've got Major prepared, ready, knows where to put his people, and knows which fights he's going to take and win, and then on top of that you have to face a Xantares who's looking as good as he has in a while, and also, like, Calix's overall rating I don't think really is that great for this stage. No, it's not. But in so many key maps and key rounds where he's, like, anchoring, he's been really good. So I think there's a hidden level of fragging in this roster almost. Despite how it feels, we're like, IGL getting all these kills. Yo, Wakadia, when he had to win a fight, when he had a duel, was winning it. Calix, when he needed a multi-kill on the anchor, was winning it. So I'd be really scared of Eternal Fire, and I do think Na'Vi, if they look the way they looked in the group stage, or the elimination stage, whatever they're calling it now, if they play that sort of similar level, where maybe get a bit too much out of JL, not that much out of anyone else, I can see this Eternal Fire upset happening easily, and hence why I predicted it. The final game that we haven't really discussed too much in detail, MOUZ G2. I think the more important part of here we need to discuss is this G2 roster. it hasn't been pretty. Now, I said in our last episode that the problem was no Hunter. Like, you had m0NESY, you had Nico in a lot of events, you had nothing from Hunter, and he didn't seem to find the synergy with Nexa. He can't really seem to find the synergy with HooXi. He's not getting his spots, his moments. The opening map of this actual stage looked crazy good. Like, they played Inferno, which for some reason made it through the veto, against Furia. If I'm not going crazy. Was it them or a different Brazilian side? Yeah, Furia.
It was Furia, yep.
Crushed them. Hunter goes ballistic. I think, oh my god. They've done it. They found the synergy. It's starting to make sense. And no. Turns out we got just the m0NESY show again. Not even Nico really turned up. He had his occasional map. Same thing with Hunter. He managed to have a couple more maps that were good. But for the most part, this was m0NESY. He won 7 clutches in just their 2 best of 3s to get them out. Like, so I was checking the clutch numbers. I saw 7 for m0NESY. I was like, oh yeah, but he played 9 maps. No, he got those all in those 6. Just those 6 right there. He had to do so much work to get him through series against Ecstatic and against whoever the hell the other shitters were.
Virtus Pro.
Virtus Pro, that's the one. Sorry, my mind went so blank.
The shitters.
I didn't pick them. I thought they were going to go out. They did. I'm going to flex it. I'm going to be so happy with myself. I know the crash cost them. We had this conversation off the air, but more importantly, it took a crash, m0NESY clutches. It took everything.
You foresaw that. That's crazy.
I did, I prayed. I prayed for times like these. You know? But no, this was not a confident-looking G2. This was a m0NESY and nothing more G2. I don't see them putting up much of a fight against MOUZ. Have you got any other expectations?
Not particularly. I think it is just worrying that, you know, when you get into a playoff stage, you want Nico there as well. You know, he's maybe had a few moments in playoffs that haven't looked too great, but that's usually in the finals. So, you know, when you're looking at a quarterfinals bracket, you're against a bunch of inexperienced players on the other team in MOUZ. Like, I say inexperienced. It's not like they haven't been sort of like building that experience portfolio, but, you know, compared to what you have on this team and the expectations of the prodigy that you've been able to sign now a few years ago, like, yeah, first off, it's nice to see m0NESY in a major playoffs because it's something that's been eluding the G2 roster ever since they signed him. But he does need help. He genuinely needs help. And, you know, Hunter can show up for a map, Nico can show up for a map. Okay, but you need consistency aside from m0NESY. And unfortunately, you're just not going to get that out of like HooXi and Nexa. That's not what they're really signed on to do either.
No, they're really here to make Nico and Hunter pop. And so far, they've done an awful job at it. In this major, especially, it's been horrendous. So, you're not feeling good as a G2 fan or a G2 better. And anyone who's picked G2 to win this series, you have rolled the dice. Like, you're expecting a massive turnaround. Turnaround that not only to, like, pre the major form, we're talking to pre-2024 form for Hunter. Like, we're talking a massive throwback. So, I wouldn't pick them in a million years. Let's move on to the next stage. We only got one disparity. Now, I don't think either one of us has picked that disparity to go through, though, because it's my Vitality, your Cloud9 versus Spirit. Have you picked Cloud9 to beat Spirit? Shock me.
No.
No, thought not. And I've picked Spirit to beat Vitality as well. I don't know how to explain it beyond... Well, I don't need to explain it, do I? They're Spirit. We have them picked all the way. At least I do.
Yeah.
I don't see why I'd pick against them. They look really dangerous still at this event. If this was even like their first ever event on a big stage, I could talk myself out of picking them. You know what I mean? If this was Katowice Pickems, I could maybe say, oh, you know, the experience is going to finally catch up with them. They're too young. They're not built for this. They've done it. I don't see why they can't do it again. Like, I guess the major has a little more pressure and concept. Like, it's the major. But, man, that's just not enough to talk me out of picking these guys.
Yeah. And, you know, I guess if you're going to play devil's advocate, Donk is falling off, you know, from 1.7 to a 1.43 as a rifler, which is, you know...
Oh, is that it?
Totally unacceptable, really. And this is the thing, you know, it's not just Donk now. Like, I think you sort of alluded to this earlier, but Shiro is also popping off in some of these rounds, and, you know, he's actually kind of stealing some of the numbers away from Donk, which I don't think anybody is complaining about on Spirit or as a viewer. Because you want to see both these guys succeed, and it did feel like we got a little bit more punch out of Shiro in this sort of group stage or the elimination stage. for me, it felt like he wasn't just sitting back as much. It felt like he was going for more opportunity picks like that. I think the Katowice win has actually sort of inspired a bit more personal confidence in his game to make some sort of bolder decisions. It's also a nice way for Spirit to add another trick up their sleeve when it comes to getting into the playoffs or playing more of these tier 1 tournaments, because they're just going to anticipate like, oh, we only have to deal with riflers running at us and setting up for flashes. Maybe a Shearer will slow walk into you with an AWP and mess you up that way as well.
Yeah, it's nice to add the extra facet, because that's always something you think about with Shearer. You see him as like the prototypical passive AWPer. Like he's really good at it. He'll win a lot of clutches. He'll play a great game, but you don't expect him to be in the other team's face. You know, they're not expecting to see that. So if he's able to step forward, because he's not really made his impact or his numbers with clutches. That's one thing I actually checked. So I saw his, I watched a few of their games, but then also I was checking the numbers. I was like, he's got a really good rating. How much of this is clutch play? None. He hasn't won a clutch. Not officially recorded on HLTV. And that's not to say he's not been great in the post round or the late round, that sort of time where AWPers can thrive. It's just that he has been more present early on in the engagements where we've not really expected him before. So that's been really cool to see. Zontix and Magic's both been solid. Chopper, I always thought his calling was actually fairly good. I've never had much of a problem with it. The fact that he's managed to keep it fluid, successful with this roster, really impressive. And I don't think stage can be too much of an issue. Sorry, Vitality. Sorry, Cloud9 in your case. Not going to happen. Other side of the bracket, we both have Eternal Fire versus MOUZ. I'm not feeling an upset here. I'm seeing MOUZ at the final. How about you?
It does. To me, this was like a 60-40 in favor of MOUZ. Like it didn't really feel out of question. There was a part of my brain scratching saying, I think weirdly like a Woxic will show up to this kind of a match. So yeah, I don't know. That's maybe just like a random intrusive thought that I shouldn't listen to, and I haven't really. I've still got MOUZ over Eternal Fire, but it does feel. I mean, that will be a very good game. I think that'll be a very like exciting, almost like scrappy game as well, because both these guys have been playing very solid Counter-Strike. For up and comers or people that aren't touted as favorites, when they have another sort of system-based team or like structured team to play against, things get a little weird. Like I feel like people make some unorthodox calls to try and throw the other one off. So I think that'll be a fun game. And honestly, I'm all here for it. I don't actually care which person comes out ahead on that, because I'm kind of rooting for both of them. I'm happy for both of them to be in an opportunity like this.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool for the players. Like, major, like Xantara's in a major final. That'd be so cool. But as a guy who's going to check the history books in a year and a half time, I want to see MOUZ Sports. I don't think Eternal Fire will be the team I want to see there. So that's why there's part of me that's like, well, not part of me, all of me is rooting for MOUZ Sports. I'm very invested in these players, just in terms of their stories, their development, and also the Counter-Strike they play. So I would much rather see MOUZ Sports in the final. You said 60-40. I'm really thinking this is more like 75-25. Like, I'm really confident in MOUZ. I think even if the game is scrappier, looser, more chaotic, I think they do have the better like individual decision makers to make it happen. Like, sure, they do have the comms debuff compared to Eternal Fire, speaking all their native tongue. I don't think it's as big a deal as some people make it, but I also don't think it's as small a deal as other people make it.
It's also
always an
like
effect.
The thing is, these MOUZ players have all like basically grown up playing like English version Counter-Strike, through their careers. They've been in international rosters for a long part of their careers, especially like the relevant part of it being in tier 1, and they've not sort of deteriorated or had as many struggles really. So
yeah,
it doesn't feel like as much of a debuff.
Stress is always a thing that hampers communication, especially, and I know speaking 2 languages, I'm pretty sure you do as well.
I don't.
Oh, you don't? I always assumed you did. I don't know why. But in my head, in my life, the second language, it's easy until I actually have pressure to do it properly. And all of a sudden, then it can get a little more difficult. That's why, everyone who speaks a second language tends to say, 2 whiskeys, and I can speak like a native-born speaker, because it just eases everything. It just flows much easier. The stage, the pressure, the sobering look of 10,000 people, that's going to have the opposite effect, I think. So if there's any way for me to talk Eternal Fire into contention, it'd be through that. But otherwise, no. I think these guys, they play really good Counter-Strike. They've played really well together, and I think they're just individually, just 1 through 5, better players. So I have MOUZ Sports winning every time.
Yeah, and I do agree. You know, I do want to see them in a finals, and I do want to see them like looking back at the history books for them to have a major finals under their belt or something of the sort. Because you think about the end of last year, what we had semis in Sydney. I think it was finals at CAC, and then sorry, I'm just gonna quick reference.
Yeah,
Last
go
World
for it.
Finals, semis, Kato semis, and now if they make it to, I mean, the fact they're in the playoffs again is another big accomplishment. But it could also be what back-to-back majors for Shui into the finals. If we're already high on Alexi making it to the finals with one roster in 2019, Shui doing it twice with completely different rosters
Yeah.
is like a madness. So I mean, he was already a very touted in-game leader. He was probably one of the hottest transfer prospects coming out of the Paris major. And if he does it again, like people are going to be asking maybe even exorbitant amounts of money for Shui to join their team and maybe fix some of the calling struggles that some of these other tier 1 organizations are currently having.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of people who could do with a great IGL, especially one who can hold a mouse. So that'll be really interesting to see if they do make it this far, which we believe they will. And in the grand final, we talk about them making it this far. I can't help but notice you haven't talked about them winning it. You've picked Spirit to beat them, haven't you?
I have picked Spirit to beat them, but
Yeah.
that's because I was able to pick Spirit in this, and I feel like I have to just kind of hold true to that, unfortunately. Also, I do want there to be like a bit of a Spirit dynasty. Like I want I almost want an era of Spirit Counter-Strike. Because I feel like it's been ages since we've had a proper like built-up era. There was maybe a small period for FaZe at the start of CS2,
Yeah.
but even then, that was there were a couple of misses in their tournament results. And also it's just so fresh and didn't last long enough for it to be relevant. Like I want Spirit to take over. I don't want it to be a conversation about who the top #1 player is in the world, rookie of the year. I don't think that should be a debate. Because these guys play good Counter-Strike, they've got good talent, and to be honest, I think the game is more exciting to a certain degree when we have a proper dominant force within the scene that everyone is trying to beat. Like everyone is implementing parts of their game, almost to like mirror what this other team is doing because it's so successful. Like that to me is the most exciting period for Counter-Strike enjoyers because you see the meta shift actively, and it's not because some drastic changes happen to the game or the way that the game is played, so to speak. It's just everyone wants that same success that this one team is captured in the bottle. Like they've caught lightning in a bottle and everyone's trying to get their own.
One of the biggest lies in sports entertainment that people tell themselves is that parity is good for viewership. It's really not. Every single sport sees the same thing. When there's a dynasty, people tune in. And I think this will be great for Counter-Strike, just in terms of global reach and media. Because Spirit building a dynasty here, winning a bunch of events. Every time they play, by the way, donk trends. Imagine if they stomp through this year, he wins Esports Rookie of the Year, Esports PC Player of the Year, and Team Spirit will win Team of the Year. The eyes that will be on Counter-Strike will be insane. So from that sort of selfish point of view, in terms of wanting my game to be the biggest game, I want Spirit to win everything. Now, the other thing I have to say, though, is the other team I'd want to win this event isn't even MOUZ Sports. I've picked Spirit to win, and if they don't win, I want Vitality to win it. So I think them going back-to-back, ZywOo then putting himself in the debate, the contention with Donk back again, and having a rivalry all year long for that #1 spot, still an amazing storyline. Not quite as, well, sensational as the Donk of it all, but it would be pretty sick to see that too. So I have to be a bit counter to my own picks, because I wasn't able to pick Spirit. I picked MOUZ Sports. My Pickem has Spirit still. I have to admit, you've got me. You've got me there. They're the better pick. They are probably going to win the event. But I do think MOUZ Sports have at least a puncher's chance in that grand final. If they have all 5 firing, and if they can find some unique ways to approach rounds, maybe some places in the veto to go that Spirit aren't really that ready for, I think there's a chance they can win it. But I'm saying, I think they have about as good a chance as Eternal Fire do of beating them. I think it's going to be a fairly one-sided affair, unless they pull out something we just weren't expecting.
Yeah, I mean, Spirit are probably going to get exposed on Vertigo again throughout this playoff bracket, and that's maybe the one caveat you could
Yeah,
even
that's
you could
one
throw
of
at them.
three, though, isn't it? It's one of
Yeah,
three. You still got to
well,
beat them once more.
now that everybody knows their weakness, I think it'll be that people will try and exploit it. So it could be a way in. Like, it could be
Do
a
you know what?
way to.
If I'm Spirit, these 3 days when I'm prepping,
Oh
Donk at
yeah,
ramp.
they've been
Donk
slamming.
at
They've been
ramp.
slamming for it.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm prepping Donk at ramp. I'm just coming into the playoffs. Sure, some people may expect it in theory, but they can't prep for it. They can't. You haven't shown it anywhere. And all of a sudden, Donk's wide swinging you on ramp. Donk's challenging you. Raw. Vertigo is no longer an easy pick. So I think if Spirit are smart, they're going to expect that and prep that exact counter. Because I think it'd be absolutely insane. Or they approach the game, and I'm going to go off some tier 2 tangent here. They approach the game the way I've seen AWPless teams, more specifically Metasport, do it. Because they don't really have a good AWPer. But what they do is they have their B player constantly fighting for openings towards the stairs, like way more aggressively than anyone else I've ever seen. Like their two highest opening and kill attempts are their main ramp player, Adam B, and their main stairs player, Susp. Both at around 25%, which is stupid high for a guy playing an anchor position, really. He constantly gets flashed in, he's constantly challenging, and he's winning lots of these fights because they've actually built it into their game plan. So that's the other way they could, I think, switch things up, but my money's on the ramp fight. That's the way teams are best at doing it. When you're playing against other tier 1 sides with good lurkers, you probably don't want to be taking that risk as often to do it towards stairs, but if you bring him into ramp, oh, I'm so down for that. That's going to be a brawl.
It is actually quite fun to like watch teams adopt certain parts of like the tier 2 game into their own game, because I have noticed since Metasport sort of rocked onto the scene and they're kind of like Vertigo specialists to a certain degree. Yeah. It does feel like teams have sort of copied their aggression timing, or like their CT aggressive timings quite a lot, and they're using very similar utility. So I was even watching it, when we were, I think, watching. God, it was one of the final games of the major elimination stage. But there have been teams that are basically copying the same way that Spirit play their CT side as well. Just flooding into bomb sites as the execute is coming. Playing ahead of all the smokes, and basically not relinquishing any control nor allowing them space to get it, because they're effectively playing off the fact that once those smokes fade, they have to worry about. First off, they have to worry about the smoke getting blown open by HEs, which is something that they can also pull in their toolkit. But then also, a lot of the times, teams don't have the extra utility to then rethrow more smokes. So even if they die fighting for the bomb sites, it's still very uncomfortable for the team that's taking over their side of the map, and then they're worrying about flanks and the timings, and it feels like other teams have integrated that into their game as well. But like these are like one of them's a very, very new rising force. Spirit obviously have a tournament under their belt. It's you anticipate that teams are going to copy that to a certain degree. But I always just find it fun when the tier 1 teams, you see small things that are just like, you've nicked that and are trying to make that a part of your game now.
Yeah, to be fair, Metasport, it's been on display because they have played some tier 1 teams. They played that Blast Showdown, they got the upset in the opening against Falcons. So even though they did go on to lose to Spirit, that's far more exposure than most tier 2 teams actually get against these bigger sides. So finally, when you see that sort of little idea in a game plan, you can actually steal it, because typically I'm not expecting tier 1 teams to be scouting too far down, but if you actually have to play them in showdown, or someone you are prepping for play them in a showdown, and you saw something work, definitely take it, especially when it's a team like them, because they really do get creative with their riflers, and their AWP is explicitly a support AWP, which I still hate, but man, they found a pretty decent way to integrate it. It's not perfect, they do have some consistency issues I think off the back of it, but it is pretty effective when it works.
It's probably the change you make. I'll put it that way.
Easily.
If you're thinking about the future for Metasport.
Easily, but the question is, which Swedish AWP do you sign? Because I think Fuzi's buyout's a bit expensive, and let's not talk about Nork. I don't think that's a viable option. So.
Chorzy, where's Chorzy? Where's he gone?
School, just like half the bloody Metasport team. I'm pretty sure he's still at school as well. So I think, yeah, this summer, basically half the Swedish talent pool gets like unlocked to go full time. Like guys like Nilo, Adam B. I mean, Susp already dropped out to go play internationally. Chorzy comes out. I'm not sure if Joel's still in school, but no one really wants to play with him in Sweden anyway, so it doesn't matter as much. But no, there is a lot to look forward to if you're a Swedish fan, actually. It's kind of surprising. It came out of nowhere almost, it feels like, the Swedish talent pool, but it's pretty sick to see. But yeah, that's sort of it. That's all the pick'ems. That's the predictions. Do you know what? I want to know your fantasy team. Have you made it yet?
Sort of. I'm very prone to flip-flopping, but it also
I
feels
know
like
you are, but I want to know what you've taken.
I've gone double Spirit, double MOUZ, and an Eternal Fire player. So
Okay.
Zontix, Chopper, Shui, Xertian, Calyx. Just 2 in-game leaders, a a player, and then Zontix and Xertian.
Okay, so I have had to, in my fantasy team, live in a parallel universe where Na'Vi don't get upset by Eternal Fire, because I needed Alexi B to afford my roster. So I've gone Chopper, Shiro, Xertian, Sue, Alexi B. So 3 IGLs, because why not? An AWPer and an entry. I think, yeah, we'll see how it goes. If as predicted, it's a MOUZ Sports versus Spirit Grand Final, and the players that need to perform, it could be very good, but also could be a disaster if one of them gets upset. If one of those two gets upset, it's an awful pick.
I also have to say, you know, if you want to be able to afford Donk, for example, 240, cheapest he's ever been in fantasy, by the way.
Yeah.
Aside from, I think, maybe the first Blast event, but even then...
That's just because of their rating, yeah.
Yeah, ever since Kato, it's like, oh, well, 260, 250, now 240. What a bargain. You still need to pick like 3 in-game leaders to afford that guy, and also probably like the second worst player on another team.
It's not even like you can pick his IGL. You buy Chopper, you can't afford Donk.
Yep.
It's pretty crazy. So you have to pick like Alexi B, Hooksy, like guys who you know are not going to make it deep.
It's like Major, Hooksy, Alexi, or Carrigan, you know, I think could replace one of them. Like, those guys are going to lose you points in fantasy, and then Donk, you're just hoping, makes it all the way and has like a 1.7 rating to carry them all through it. So if anybody's picked Donk, you are a crackhead.
Okay, it's a terrible pick. I think Shiro's just way better bang for the buck right now, considering his rating's the same. If that keeps on going, considering he costs, what, 25k less? Far better pick. Way better pick. Anyone who's going for fantasy teams, that's the way to do it. But yeah, that's when immediately MOUZ Sports gets upset, and it's all for naught.
Yep, that's exactly how I'm feeling. So, but fantasy is random. Blair, top of the celebrity fantasy, also just says he just kind of picks whoever, and he just happens to be at the top. And he's like, there is no science to this. In fact, it's just all random, which is true. I do feel like there is an element to that. There's
definitely a lot of strategy, considering Lucy Luce is always on top of the fantasy leaderboard for celebrities. So there's clearly something to it, and I've only played 9 games and I'm tied with, well, I'm 1 point behind Banks. And I've not played every game, so clearly there's an element of skill because my genius translates. So it all makes sense. It all makes sense. But no, I'm sure there's some bad examples in the fantasy leaderboard though. When you look at the analysts especially, Pimp, who's played all 10 games, is in 29th with 30 points, which is just shocking.
And Launders has played 3 games and he has 26. So it's like...
Exactly.
You know, give and take.
Yeah, if you don't play, you're not going to get points. But hey, if you're bad at it, you're not going to do well either. So that's the show. That's basically our full playoff preview. All our picks for our own little game, our pickems, and our fantasy sort of previewed for you. Hopefully that's enough to tide you over until the next big event. Because I think is there a big gap before we get to Chengdu and the other stuff, or is it a pretty fast turnaround?
I think Chengdu is pretty soon afterwards.
Chengdu starts April 8th. Yes, it's a week later. Holy crap.
Yeah, because I remember in, James' exit interview or whatever he was talking about, it's like, oh, we have to start getting prepared for Chengdu. It's like a couple of weeks away, and you know that's all you can really focus on next. So,
there's a bit of a bigger gap between Chengdu and Pro League, so maybe there'll be a bit of a break.
ESL Challenger Melbourne at the same time as ESL Pro League, so you know there's some,
but we're not going to preview
tier 1,
that,
tier 2.
I mean, I'll be talking about it every Sunday on Retake the Week, but no, this will not probably require a preview, will it? We don't do those sorts of smaller events. We're only about the big leagues here, the proper good teams.
Yes, I just hope to work those Challenger events.
Exactly. But no, that's been the episode. Thank you for watching. Members got to see this video early because I'm putting it out for everyone on Tuesday night, but members get to see it as soon as it's recorded because they're special to me. And yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.